Military History of Louis Dudeck, June 1st, 2007 at the Lowell Area Historical Museum. He lives at 3081 Kissing Rock Drive in Lowell. He was born September 3rd, 1943. Doing the interview is Ethan Drain. The camera people are Ashley Naraki and Jeanette Greiner. He served in Vietnam as a machine gunner, and after Vietnam he was a teacher.
Am I ready?
You ready?
Hi, I'm Louis Dudeck. I was just telling these guys a moment ago. I was born in 1943. I'm 63 years old, and I went in the Marine Corps in 1963. So a lot of threes and a lot of age there. Okay.
Thanks for sitting down.
No problem. Okay, you gonna ask me questions?
Yeah. No, actually, I'm just gonna kind of guide you throughout, but
okay,
it's kind of open. Just start with your youth through your high school years, where you grew up. Anything about that?
Okay. Well, if as far as high school, if there's anything you don't want to do, is follow my example in high school, because I wasn't the best student. Let's say sports and just having a good time were paramount to me, and I was one of these guys, kind of like my son. I didn't crack books very much, but I did okay on exams, so I'd wind up getting a good mark on an exam, and I would have it all taken away because I never did the homework. So not a good example to follow, but I seem to have made it, and so that's okay. My son did much the same thing as me, and I used to take off the belt to him when I was young, and he wouldn't do his homework. Today he's a scientist out at Los Alamos National Lab in New Mexico. So teachers, watch that, you know. Even the ones that don't do the homework can make it. Okay, so that's high school. I got out of high school and I graduated in 1962 with not the best grades. And then I hung around my hometown of Bloomer, Wisconsin. That's where I was raised until I was about 19. And then I wanted to do something a little more exciting than running around and operating a little pool hall that I had there. So I joined the Marine Corps in 1963. Went to California, did my basic training, or we call it basic training, is good, boot camp, in San Diego, and they called us Hollywood Marines out there because we were pretty close to that area. Yeah. We went to boot camp there, and I recall just after finishing boot camp, when I was going to advanced infantry training, is when President Kennedy was killed.
Oh, really?
And so it was kind of spooky, because all of a sudden, one morning, couldn't have been, I don't know, it was real early, and people were banging on everything, and I could hear truck engines and just noise that we normally didn't expect. And some officers come running through, pack your gear, we're going to issue cards for drawing ammunition and all that kind of thing, because they thought something terrible was going to happen regarding Russia and all of those kinds of things because of Kennedy being assassinated. But luckily that died down within a very short time, and we went about our normal training. And I was in California for approximately 2.5 years. And in that time we did a lot of mountain training. We trained on amphibious vehicles, rubber boats in the surf. The water is so cold out there, you can't believe it.
It's cold?
Oh, God.
Right.
Along the California shoreline, comes right down out of Alaska.
Oh,
so it's very, very cold. The water never gets over maybe 50, 55 degrees. So they would keep us out there in that water for hours. And then come in and roll around in the sand. So beaches are beautiful. Water is freezing. That's why most of the time, when you see beaches in California, everybody's up on the beach.
Nobody's in the water.
So but it was great. Loved it out there. So training was pretty rough. We never had any particular wars in mind. We were just kind of waiting around for any war to come along, and that's kind of what Marines do. We're kind of what I guess you would call the shock troops, assault troops or whatever. So.
Did you guys know that issues in Vietnam were going on?
Not at
Or
that
there was
time,
tension?
really. Vietnam, none of us ever heard anything about that. Even though that did get started during the Kennedy administration, prior to, obviously, before he was assassinated. But it just wasn't an issue. So when we finally did get involved there and they determined that we were going to send a bunch of Marines over, we had done all the wrong kind of training for that, because we were in the mountains, we were in the desert. Did a lot of training on tracked vehicles and assault landings of beaches. It's kind of funny because whenever we were going to go aboard ship and do one of these assault on a beach in California, all the people would come down. They would picnic, they bring their kids, and watch these crazies get in boats, get on line, and come storming ashore on the beach. It was, I guess, a pretty good show for them.
Home around
So
the trade.
we'd go strut around afterwards. We got leave, and then we could go into town, and the girls really loved that.
So when did you finish
We
up?
better not get into that part. But, okay, where am I now? 2.5 years in California. You want me to go right into heading over to Hawaii and Okinawa and that kind of thing, and then before Vietnam?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. We took a ship out of San Diego. We had over 1,000 men on this. It's a full battalion. That's roughly what a battalion is. A reinforced battalion is 1,000 men. And out of San Diego, we ran into rough weather. I mean, it was, when I say rough, like 30-foot waves, almost the whole way. And can you picture about 900 of these 1,000 guys
Weaving over the
heaving
rail.
there? You know, most of them never made it to the rail. Kind of the decks and it was not a very pretty thing. But I didn't get sick, but most everybody did. But anyway, we made it to Hawaii, where we took on provisions and that kind of thing. And we got off the ship for about 24 hours, and I wound up spending every nickel I had in my pocket. Which wasn't a great deal, but we had a good time, and everybody got on board. Probably not the best ship. We knew where we were going. So from then, it was another 10-day trip to Okinawa on board ship, and there's not a whole lot to do. We would do PT, physical training, exercises, and that kind of thing, hours and hours and hours on end. And then when we got bored, we'd had boxing matches with the Navy. We affectionately called them squids, but I have lots of friends in the Navy, so we kind of harass each other about that. But anyway, we would do these, they called smokers. So we'd do boxing matches, and I think that's why today I have to go to the doctor. He's going to try to straighten my nose, because I think in one of those I always was a great hitter, but I always hit people in the fist with my face.
So you were involved in the matches?
Oh, I was from time to time, but I can't see a thing without my glasses, so it's just a matter of seeing how many times they could hit me before they got tired. So, no, I don't think a Marine ever lost a match aboard ship.
Oh, really?
That I can ever remember. But it's what we did.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got to Okinawa, and we went into jungle training there, and we did all kinds of things that we never had an opportunity to do in California, like play with the snakes and the lizards and the things in the jungle, which I really don't like. We did a lot of free rock climbing, rappelling down cliffs, and everything, we try to be silent. And we had one occasion when we were going down this 100-foot cliff. I mean, it's straight rock wall, straight down. And the thing was, if we're making a night assault or something and we're going up these cliffs, you free climb the cliffs. In the process of coming off, we had to simulate that we were taking our wounded down with us. So the only way you do that is a guy gets on your back and you go down and try to rappel down these cliffs. And one guy, he took the silence so seriously that he lost his hold on the rope and he went down. He never made a sound. The only thing you heard is the clatter of his rifle when it hit the side of the cliff on the way down. And he really didn't get hurt bad, so.
Fell the whole way.
He went the whole way.
Oh, wow.
Never said a word. Never yelled, nothing. So. But it was fun. They would drop us out, a couple miles out in the ocean. We would, first we'd go out on rubber boats. We'd do rubber boat training. The surf is very heavy there. So 8 of us would get on a rubber boat. You didn't ride in the boat, you rode on the tubes.
That were connected to
that, yeah, and you straddled those, so one foot's in the water and the other's in the boat, and you paddled, and your gear was on the inside. It was more important that the gear stayed dry, your ammunition, rifle, and so on, than it was you. So we would go out a couple of miles, and on a signal, we would all drop off, and somebody, a Navy seaman or something, would take charge of the rubber boats, and then we would swim back in. And we did that in daytime and at night, and it was kind of, you better know how to swim pretty good. I can't remember, I think the first time we did that, they gave us life jackets to wear. The second time, there were no life jackets.
just you and a couple miles away.
Yeah, but that time I remember was in daylight. You could look down, and the water was just crystal clear, and it was only maybe 20, 30 feet deep, and I saw sea snakes. You know what a sea snake is? It's one of the most deadly creatures on the face of the earth. And we had sea snakes. There were dozens of them. They have very tiny head. The body may be about 6, 7, 8 feet long, but the head is no bigger than my thumb. So they can't grab anything, but they get fish and so on. And you look down in the water, and they're swimming right down with you, about 3 or 4 feet below the surface. You talk about an incentive to get on dry land. That was it. So we trained in Okinawa for a couple months maybe, and got back on ships again, and now we were going to Vietnam. And I don't remember exactly how long it took us to get there. A few days, maybe 3, 4 days. And so we were all excited and we're all nervous because we now have our Geneva Convention cards, which says that if you're a POW, you have to abide by certain rules, and so does the enemy and so on. Of course, nobody told them that. They just told us. So, we're all nervous. And we get to the point where you can see the hazy line of the coast of Vietnam in the distance. And you think, oh, here we go. This is the real thing. And early one morning, it comes over the loudspeakers aboard ships. Marines, man your battle stations. So we got up on the deck, and they sent us down these landing nets on the side of ships, and the ships are, they're bobbing in the ocean, and the landing net's a pretty dangerous thing to go down. But we got in these landing boats, and we're maybe 2, 3 miles offshore, and it took us hours to get everybody in the boats, and then finally, at some point, some given signal, all the boats get online. And they gun the engines, and we go racing for the shore. And we got to a point maybe quarter of a mile from the shore, and it's lock and load. You know, your platoon sergeant, lock and load. That means you put a round in the chamber, and we're getting ready to rock and roll. So now we are nervous, and some of the guys are sick. We're bobbing around for hours in these little boats, so they're tossing their cookies, and I just want to get off. So, scared to death, all of a sudden the ramps drop, and we go screaming and yelling and running up the beach, make it up maybe 30, 40 yards, and you hit the sand, you know, looking for something. And who do we have? We got dozens of little old ladies out there with little coolers selling beer and pop on the beach, and reporters and TV cameras watching. It was nothing. It was just staged for the press. And of course the Vietnamese knew we were coming ashore long before we did. They knew everything we did long before we did it. So I think they had more people inside our own establishment, let's say, military establishment, than we did. So that was our big landing in Vietnam, and that was right around the Da Nang area. And we moved inland from that. We walked. We never rode anywhere. We either took choppers or we walked. And we walked to the Da Nang Air Base. And we took up positions around it. It's a huge, huge air base. And so our battalion of roughly 1,000 guys, we didn't cover maybe 1/10 of it in terms of setting up a perimeter, a defensive perimeter around the base. So we stayed there for, I don't know, a couple of weeks. I don't think I heard a shot fired in anger for at least 2 weeks. Every once in a while, one of our guys would get jumpy and start cranking off rounds at something, who knows what. And in fact, maybe there were some probes, but the Vietnamese, the VC, were very good at getting in and looking at things without being seen. And we learned that later, the hard way. You can stop me and ask me anything you want to.
That's okay. When did you start to see actually heavy fire or major combat, or start to get involved with it yourself?
You know, I'd have been perfectly happy if everything would have stayed just like it was at Da Nang the first time, but it didn't. We got orders to go somewhere, and I wish I could remember the names of the little towns and so on, but the only, you know, I can just remember vague things that probably, you know, it would make sense to people who were there, like Chu Lai, the Chu Lai Peninsula, Marble Mountain, Monkey Mountain, the A Shau Valley, Kisan, you know, some of those names I know you've heard. But I was in a lot of those places, and in each of those places, it had its own little atmosphere. I mean, it was always dangerous. There was always something going on. But let's take Chu Lai, for example. When we were there, it's a huge sandy area. It's like 50, 60, 100 square miles of nothing but snow white sand and clumps of bamboo growing out of that. And when I say clumps, it may be acre, 2 acres, that kind of thing. And it's just snow white sand made up of seashells and so on. And the temperature is extremely hot. It's very hot and humid all the time. And we would patrol that area. We had a major battle going through there. I wasn't involved in that. I didn't get into Chu Lai until after that, pretty much. But we were sent in to clean up little pockets of resistance, VC, that were still there. It was a Viet Cong stronghold before we got there. And these guys would, every once in a while, somebody would take a few shots at us from the bamboo thickets, and we'd have to hit the sand to figure out where the fire was coming from. And the above ground temperature is probably 105, but you get down in that sand, it's 130 degrees in And of course, we're all wearing our stateside utilities, which are heavy cotton uniforms. There's no such thing as jungle uniforms, which are very light and airy. So at that time, we took a lot of heat-related casualties as a result of it. Not too much by gunfire, but these guys knew what they were doing. How they would get us down on the sand, and it wouldn't take very many shots before you figured out, when you see dirt popping up beside you, that you want to hit the dirt, whether you want to go down 130 degrees or stand there and let them shoot you. So, not very many casualties due to gunfire, but a lot of heat-related injuries there, and some evacuations, but we eventually cleared that. We didn't take too many casualties, and we didn't inflict too many casualties, but we pushed the BC out of the Chu Lai Peninsula and went on to bigger and better things down in the A Shau Valley, which was a real hotbed. That place was just, when I say valley, it's mountains, it's rivers, it's swamp, just about the worst thing that you could ever imagine. It's absolutely beautiful country, but in terms of trying to live there and fight there, it was just a nightmare, because they could hit you from just about anywhere at any time. And we had some really crazy rules and restrictions that we had to live by, because for some reason President Johnson, who was in office at that time, and the Defense Secretary McNamara, figured that if we want to put on a good, strong show of force, but we don't want to be too mean to anybody. So one of the little rules that we had to work with was, you don't fire unless you're fired upon. And when you're in jungle, I can see maybe from me to you, if it's if we got a clear zone, because the trails, which we didn't walk on trails, we tried to stay off the trails because they always booby-trapped the trails. And so we'd stay off as far as we could and still be able to see the trail, so we know where it went. But in that kind of a situation, you're just as likely to meet somebody coming at you as not, or have an ambush set up to get you. And the rule of thumb in the bush is the first guy who shoots lives. And so we didn't pay real close attention to the rules of engagement. When we'd leave the wire, which means when we left wherever we were, to go in the bush and do patrols or something, but one of the sergeants from headquarters would be there, and he'd check the chamber of everybody's rifle and machine gun and so on. When we go out and we get 20 yards beyond him, and it was lock and load, brother. It was, and we were, like I said, I was in machine guns, or like you said, I was a machine gunner. And they always loved to have guns along on these patrols, because we were the firepower. We were the heavy weapons. And most everybody was armed with M14s, which is a .308 caliber rifle, which is a good heavy round. But it only has a 20-round magazine. Now my M60, it's a 23-pound gun, and I used to carry 600 rounds of ammunition for that. So I'm packing maybe 60, 70 pounds just with that, without getting to my other gear, my canteens and my food. I carried a .45 pistol at that time. Whenever something got really bad, when we got hit on patrol, whether we were ambushed or just needed to put out some fire, it was guns up, and then we would head up to wherever the action was. And as soon as we got up there and started cranking out rounds, nobody wants to be anywhere near us, because we're the heavy firepower. And once you got that firepower going out, everybody out there wants to get rid of us. So we drew a lot of fire. And in the course of that, you know, I kind of make light of it. It's pretty serious business, but there's all kinds of little things about the life expectancy of a machine gunner in combat, anywhere from 7 to 20 seconds. And I, in fact, during my tour, which was cut short by me getting shot, I lost almost 3 crews of my men to being wounded or killed. And so, you know, we were a pretty valuable asset, those guns, but boy, oh boy, oh boy, it get real tough.
On these patrols that you go out on,
Yeah.
was there always a certain objective, or were you always dispatched to back up someone else who could fire?
Good question, real good question. I wouldn't have expected you to answer that, but it's a smart question, because at that time, our objective was try to get them to stop and fight, because we only ever saw very small units, maybe 2, 3, 10, 15 at the very most of the VC. And they would fire a few rounds, and then because we had fire superiority, we could crank out a lot of rounds real fast. And, you know, Marines are trained marksmen. Every Marine, whether you're in the air wing or a cook or whatever, is a rifleman, and you're trained marksman. We practice that a lot. We're very, very good shots. So when we start cranking out rounds, they leave. So our objective in going out was to get hit. Now that sounds pretty stupid, but that's exactly what it was. Go out, make contact, and then radio back your position and try to get support to come in around so we can get them trapped. And, you know, get them to stand up and fight, because we knew in a stand-up fight, nobody's going to beat us. Can't. Impossible. Too much firepower. But, you know, another thing I mentioned earlier was that they usually knew where we were going. They usually would make it a point to not be there when we got there. And we were always under observation. And we never went anywhere, whether it was you're in your own compound, whether you're in the bush, whether you're in the Chu Lai sands, that somebody wasn't watching you.
From their side.
From their side. That's why, this leads me to another thing. When we would do these ambushes and patrols, at night, we didn't come back in. We stayed where we were. When I was in the bush, I never saw a building bigger than a little one-room hooch in 3 months. We never got out of the bush. We were supplied there. You know, the helicopters come and drop water and ammunition and food. We would just stay there. But anyway, we were always under observation, so when we get to a certain area, whether we were doing patrols or an ambush, we always stopped for the night before it was dark, because we knew we were being watched, and we wanted them to know where we were. And then after dark, maybe 9, 10 o'clock, a couple hours after dark, we would move.
So all the movements at night.
Yeah, we would move to a different location, maybe 25 yards away, 30, 40 yards away, but where we could see where we were. And then we learned this the hard way too, because they would have all of our positions plotted before it ever got dark. They knew exactly where the machine guns were, which were their main targets, where every fighting hole was. So after dark, we would move. We'd set up and try to do it as quietly as we possibly could. A lot of times we'd leave everything there, our food and canteens, and just take our rifles and ammunition so that we'd make as little noise as possible and move off. And then when you start hearing noises back where we were, then we'd throw flares. We had these little things you'd hit on a rock and it would shoot a flare up and, would light things up, and then we would light them up.
So you wouldn't be afraid to fight
We
them
would
at night?
ambush them then.
Yeah.
Where they were trying to get us, so we learned the hard way, that's how you dealt with that.
Can you recall after, or what, I'm sorry, the Chu Lai Valley, did you say?
The
Or
what?
Chu Lai Peninsula?
Oh, Chu Lai.
Chu Lai.
Yeah, on the sand.
Can you recall where you moved after that? Or where your next movement was to?
Not exactly. I mean, it just, with us, if something came up, if we're out on Chu Lai, and they said, okay, there's a unit of the 9th Marines being hit over here 20 miles away, the next thing we knew, we got a flight of helicopters in. And everybody gets on a helicopter and off you go. So we never knew exactly where you were going at any particular operation. It was just get in there and you learned where you were afterwards, maybe, if you were lucky. So it wasn't a matter of saying, okay, I did operations around Da Nang, I did operations in Chu Lai, which was a huge area. I did operations in the A Shau Valley, Marble Mountain, Monkey Mountain, aptly named because it's crawling with monkeys. But these are all just, I wish I could paint the right picture for you what these places look like, because it was just narrow ravines of rocky ledges and bamboo growing everywhere, and just in places almost impenetrable. You've heard of a triple canopy jungle. Some of the area was that. They got big trees and then smaller trees, and then the growth on the bottom where the sunlight doesn't even get in. And so that's the kind of area we worked, crossing rivers, monsoons. And, we were there one time during a big, it wasn't a monsoon, it was, what do they call them down there, typhoon? Yeah, I think that's what it was, a typhoon came ashore. And I think this is when we were just near Chu Lai, because it was low ground. Well, a lot of Vietnam is low ground. But anyway, the typhoon came in so fast, we were in positions at the edge of a big jungle area. And I think we'd been there for a couple of days because they'd been warning us that this thing was coming, a big typhoon, which is a hurricane. And over the course of maybe 12, 14 hours, we had that much rain, maybe 12, 15, 20 inches of rain. You can't imagine how hard it can rain. But it was just, if you looked up, you would drown. And I had my machine gun set up and sandbagged in on tripods, which we never carried into combat. Tripods, 15 pounds of dead weight. We usually fired from the hip or from bipods. But anyway, it was set up on tripods, and the water came up so fast that my gun was submerged. We couldn't find the gun for a bit.
That was fun.
The water, we thought we were going to drown. The water came up to almost waist deep.
Oh, wow.
And as far as you could see, it was water. And the gun is down there. So we had to go feeling around trying to find out where the machine gun was again. And, that lasted for maybe 24 hours before the water finally went down. And of course, all of our gear was gone.
Oh.
It had washed away. We were just lucky to salvage our canteens and personal equipment, ammo and rifles. So we had to be completely resupplied again after that.
Can you recall any major battles that you participated in? Took part in?
Well, most of what we did was hit and run. It never took more than 10, 15 minutes, tops. But the only big one I can recall is Operation Harvest Moon, which would have been It started on December 9th, 1965, and I remember that because we have never taken so many casualties, so many dead and wounded at one time. Well, our company, which at that time was Lima Company, L Company, 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines, we were the point element for a battalion or regimental size operation. How we got to be point, I don't know, but that's not a good place to be. But anyway, we were, and we were set up in a series of V's. And then we were moving across these rice paddies as a, so that we're covering our flanks, and we're trying to cover the rear and the front, but you don't want to give the bad guys out in front of you a clear target, so we don't just all go on line.
Right.
And we did a series of V's, and everybody's spaced a good 5 to 10 yards apart. So it looks like a very huge assembly of men, and in fact it really is. But we're all set far apart, so on one hand you got a bunch of guys around you, on the other hand, there's nobody for 30 feet on either side of you. Right. So you kind of feel a little all alone in a situation like that. But Harvest Moon was a biggie. It's in a lot of histories of the Vietnam War. And we were moving across this big rice paddy, and I saw, there were ditches or ravines on the left, I can remember that, and we could see a tree line over here in front of us, a line of jungle, and I saw a little hooch over there, and pretty calm, and on my right, what I know now, it was Hill 43. When I say 43, it's 43 meters. There were no other hills. It was just there. It's like a big dumb rock sitting out there, but it was a huge hill, 43 meters high by, I don't know how, but it was how wide it was, but maybe covered 50 acres, 80 acres, something like that, loaded with rocks and so on. So we started to take a little bit of sniper fire from the flanks, which is no big deal because we always get that. And we hadn't taken any casualties for quite some time as we were moving through these rice paddies. But then the volume of fire started to increase. We just passed through this little village, was set up on the side of the rice paddies, and it had maybe 20 or 25 hooches, buildings. But the odd thing about it was there were no people. You could see where there were ducks and their chickens and their pigs were running around. And, there was food on tables, and there was corn and all that. So we knew they're not here for a reason. They know something we don't know. They always knew something we don't know. And it's kind of like Iraq today. Our troops moved through there, and you got all kinds of people milling around and, smiling for the cameras and that kind of thing. And then the next scene, there are no people there. That means one thing: you better be getting low and doing it in a hurry, because they know what's going to happen. Okay, I digress.
Oh.
But there's similarities. Anybody who can't see the parallels between what we're doing over there today and what happened 50 years ago, they don't want to know. Okay, now you already know my political affiliation too. Okay, anyway, we're moving across this rice paddy, and the fire is increasing, and so we thought, okay, something's coming down here. And it was just like somebody flipped a switch. We went from maybe 10, 15 rounds a minute that we were coming in, to all of a sudden the place looked like it was hailing, the bullets hitting in the rice paddies and so on. Well, we hit the ground rather fast. The patties were full of water at that time, so I don't know what time of year that would have made it. Well, I do, it was December. So that's their planting season, and so the series of dikes go around all these rice paddies. So we set up our guns and took our defensive positions right along these rice paddy dikes. And something that was really odd about these things that we didn't discover until afterwards, periodically along these dikes, and these, the normal rice paddy dikes about this wide, but these dikes were maybe 4 feet, which seemed kind of odd, but what do we know? And every so often there were little mounds on top of these dikes that maybe were, maybe 3-4 feet high, and about as round as this table right here, maybe 4 or 5 foot in diameter. And what we didn't know until later is that there were tunnels dug down in the sides of the rice paddy dikes, which would come up inside those little mounds. They're just like, what do they call those, ants, like an anthill. And then they had, the VC were in there. It would be a one-man position, and there would be a little firing slit, and we saw them later. They were just very tiny things, just big enough to stick the barrel of an AK or an SKS out and shoot at you. Well, apparently the guys who sprung the ambush and from the front sprung it a little too quick, because when we took our defensive positions, we were on the wrong side of these for them to shoot at us. The little fellas inside these little mounds, and there must have been dozens of them, couldn't shoot at us. And their buddies over in the tree line a couple 100 meters away were shooting, and they were shooting in their own little mounds. So they were in a kind of a bad way right there. But we never again realized that until afterwards. But the fighting was very, very fierce at that point. We were putting out rounds as fast as we could. Very hard to see targets because of the smoke. But every so often you'd see, one of the enemy go zipping across and try to take them down. But because of the fact that we were getting so much fire over such a large area, the flanks all of a sudden erupted. They had us in a horseshoe, really. So once it's opened up on the front, the fire just started all the way around us. And from this hill on my right side, Hill 43, they were up there like fleas on a dog and firing down on us. So they got the high ground.
Could you see a lot of them, or were most of them
Well,
like in the woods?
Very difficult to see because they were really good at camouflage. You never see pictures of the North Vietnamese or Viet Cong where they wouldn't have camouflage all over their bodies, branches and so on. And that's the bright side. On the end, they had some pretty screwy guys too. Because we'd be in the jungle and all of a sudden you'd see, the conical hats that they wore, they look like little pyramids on their heads. They're white, about so big around. It's to keep the sun and the rain off. It's their own little house away from home, you might say. But you'd be walking along and, keeping your eyes busy looking for trouble, and all of a sudden you'd spot these little hats bouncing through the brush. You can't see them, but you can see these little white hats. And so then you'd, more often than not, you could spot a rifle or something like that somebody was carrying, and then we'd just light them up. But, you would think, take the damn hat off. How smart is that?
Couldn't see them, I don't think you see them.
But, okay, so they did silly things just like we did from time to time. So anyway, back to Harvest Moon, in that particular battle, we lost 12 killed and 54 wounded out of a company of roughly 200 men. So that's very, very heavy casualties. And at one point, all of our corpsmen were down. All of them. We had 3 corpsmen assigned up there where I was, toward the front, and all 3 of them were killed. They were all killed helping, other wounded Marines. And these are Navy guys. These are Navy corpsmen. They're not Marines, they're Navy corpsmen. So at one point, during this, it was getting pretty bad. We had a lot of wounded there, and we had run out of bandages and that kind of thing. And so I went back looking for another corpsman. I knew there had to be somebody back there because they set up an aid station back in that little village that we had just gone through at the start. And that's where they were collecting all the wounded, hopefully to get them evacuated at some point. And I'm going along this dike, and I could see a couple of guys in the water down here, laying in the water, and all you could see was his nose, his nose and his mouth sticking out of the water. The rest of it was totally submerged, and here was our company first sergeant and the company executive officer, which was the first lieutenant, and down there. And I started yelling at them. They couldn't hear much of what I was saying. One, because there was a lot of shooting going on, but 2, their ears were underwater. So I started yelling at them, we need a corpsman, we need a corpsman. One of them stuck his head up. I don't know which one to get the hell out of here. He said, "You're drawing fire."
Were they just hiding?
Oh yeah, they were just trying to stay low.
Guys that are supposed to be.
Well, these guys are armed with nothing but pistols. They're supposed to be coordinating the fighting and putting guys where they need to be in order to get the job done. But at that point, they were just trying to save their own necks, which, afterwards we kind of laughed about it. But the first lieutenant, a little later on, well, first off, we found out there were no corpsmen left except the one that was taking care of the wounded and the dying in the village. But that lieutenant later on, when evacuating wounded up by where we were, took a bullet through the hand, and as a result, he was a Silver Star winner in that particular battle. So anyway, when I couldn't get a corpsman, I went back to my gun, and they're still putting out a lot of fire, and somebody had called in. Were you still okay?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I was just checking the tape. We're still good.
Somebody had called in for a medevac helicopter, and I didn't know it at the time, but this helicopter came right over our heads, and apparently at some point, I didn't realize, I didn't even hear it, that the pilot was shot, and the helicopter came down like a rock, and it crashed in just a few meters from us. I don't know, the rotor blades are around 50, 60 feet long, and one of the rotor blades hit the ground right by the foot of one of our ammo carriers for the gun, for the machine gun. So I mean, it was that close, a matter of 15 yards maybe. And the engine was just screaming and glowing cherry red on that thing. And we saw the crew chief got out, and I think I saw the co-pilot get out and a gunner get out. And everybody started yelling, "Hey, we gotta get out of here because that thing's gonna blow." And it also, not only, it was a medevac helicopter, but it was actually a gunship. He was coming in to take off our wounded, but he was a gunship, and he's loaded with rockets, and 2.75 rockets. And so everybody started hollering, "Hey, get out of here, get out of here, that thing is gonna blow." So we packed up the gun, and we were just gonna move out of the way. And as I'm passing by this chopper, I could see that there was still somebody slumped in the in the pilot's seat. And I didn't do this the first time. I'm starting to remember two things. Excuse me.
Oh, it's no problem.
And there was somebody else, a little guy with me. I'm a pretty big guy, and the other fellow was smaller. And so as we're passing by, we can see this guy there, the pilot. And so he said, we can't leave him here, we gotta go get him out of there. And I don't think anybody else really understood that there was somebody still in the chopper. It was just, we happened to be going by the main sliding doors that were open. And so we went over there, and I cut the belt that was holding him in, part of his harness, to get him in, and then I could see he was alive because he was moving. And so I started to pull him, or we started to pull him. And he looked at me, and I said, sir, this is gonna hurt. He was a major. And I said, this is gonna be painful. And he said, he looked at me, he says, son, you do what you gotta do. He's a Marine pilot. So we dragged him out. I was the only one who had any chance of carrying him through the rice paddies. So we got him on my back, and I knew he was hurt. I didn't know how bad he was hurt. And so I started back, and the bullets are flying, and I'm scared absolutely out of my mind. At one point I can remember my helmet coming off, and I still got my rifle. I guess I was the team leader of guns at that time, so I was carrying an automatic rifle. And to this day, I don't know, but I think he got hit again while he was on my back, while I was carrying him. Got him in a fireman's carry, but you couldn't move fast because, like I said, the rice paddy water is maybe 6 inches deep, but then there's 10 inches of mud under that. So he keeps sinking in, and you gotta pull 1 foot out at a time. But the other part of the company, most of the company, by that time it had made it back to the edge of that village where there was a more secure, defensible position, dike, if you will, that they were behind. I could hear everybody yelling. That was maybe 50, 60 yards away. And so we're moving in that direction, and I'm yelling at them, I need some help, I need some help. And when I got to within maybe 20 feet or so, a couple of guys ran out and they took him off my back, and we were able to get in behind the dikes, rice paddy dikes, and the fire actually was slowing down then. I could remember there wasn't so many rounds being popped, but after that helicopter went down, there was initially when they saw a lot of us trying to make it back, get away from the thing, but at that point then it started to slow down. And so we got set in, and I remember I was just about dead on my feet. Somebody, it was either the company gunny sergeant or the platoon commander, somebody said, son, you're gonna get a cite. No, he knew my name, so he said, Dudeck, he said, you're gonna get a citation for this, or something like that. And nothing really ever came of that because, well, one, the pilot died. Somebody came and told me within a couple of hours that he never made it, that he didn't get evac'd in time, and so he died. And then two, I got shot just a few weeks later, so I was gone, and so that's the end. I did inquire about it years later, but there was no record of anything like that. They don't mean a thing anyway, but with a Bronze Star and $4, you can get a cup of Starbucks coffee. That's about what it amounts to. So that was Harvest Moon. And then after we got done with that, that particular phase of that battle, we had to go take that hill on the right side. So now we're approaching dark. And the whole scenario of the battle, I think it started at around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Like I say, most of them are 15 minutes or so, 10 minutes, 10 seconds. And this one was running hours. And so we had already had a lot of casualties, and they were stacking up big, and we were still taking heat from that hill. So we did our good old Marine Corps thing, get online and charge the hill. And we chased the VC off of that hill, and we took control of it, and we brought all of our people up there. And it was big enough to handle the whole company, so it was a pretty big hill. And my understanding as of at the end of that for us was pretty much the end of it, because we had to be evacuated out of there the next day, and, to be refit. We needed more men, we needed more equipment, we needed ammunition, and so on. But I do remember the following morning, we're set in on this hill. We're thinking we're going to get hit all night long, that they're going to come up this hill after us, so we were ready. And at dawn, just as it started to get a little hazy light, you can see people out there in the rice paddies where we had spent the previous afternoon in the battle. They're out there picking up ammunition and grenades and stuff. They didn't do that very long. And we kind of closed out that battle with those guys. So, like they did stupid things too. You don't get caught in broad daylight picking up the other guys' guns and ammo. So they did. So that ended that particular battle. And I thought, as I recall, they said we were involved with about roughly 600 North Vietnamese and VC in that battle, and we killed something over 200. And we took 12 killed and 54 wounded. So, need to change.
Yeah, if you would.
Okay, we're back.
We're back. Awesome. So I think
Any other direction you want me to go, or I just kind of continue, or we're done with Harvest Moon?
So you're done with Harvest Moon. Take us to where, eventually up to the point where you got.
Oh, where I got shot?
Hit.
Okay. Well, luckily before that I got to go on R&R to Okinawa. You're supposed to be able to go once during your tour, not to Okinawa. That's probably the dead end of all places to go on R&R. But it's kind of an understanding that whoever got out of country for a little while would bring little gifts back to the rest of the guys in the squad. So I went on R&R to Okinawa, and I think I had about $500 in my pocket. And then on Christmas Eve, the worst possible time to go, Christmas Eve. Not much going on. But anyway, I do remember I bought quite a lot of liquor to bring back, because it was real hard to get refreshment in the bush. You know, the rules said that you're supposed to be allowed 2 sodas or 2 beers a day only. We would see that once in maybe a month and a half, where you get something like that. But anyway, I brought back some refreshment for the boys on the line, and I got back before New Year's Eve. And when I got off the plane, I felt like I could hardly walk, because everything was clinking and clanking so much. I had a sea bag full of booze that I brought back, and so long about. I was saving it for a special occasion. Everybody knew I had it, but they were being really, really nice to me. So I think I even got out of a couple of ambushes and patrols just because they knew.
That you had that?
I had that. And anyway, it came New Year's Eve, and New Year's Eve is a pretty special thing in Vietnam. It's like 4th of July, New Year's Eve, Christmas, and everything else rolled into one. And the Vietnamese make a big deal of it. And they just, if they didn't have a war going on, you wouldn't have known it because of all of the stuff that they had flying up in the air on New Year's Eve. So I recall we're sitting out, I had pulled out my stash, and I'm sitting up on the top of my bunker, and I had passed out bottles of Seagrams and stuff to my buddies, and we're all sitting there just kind of watching all of the flares and the I think the VC were shooting up in the air, and the Vietnamese army, and so everybody was shooting up in the air, making a lot of noise and having a good time. And then all of a sudden I heard something behind me, and I looked, oh, there's my platoon commander, second lieutenant. Usually not a good thing, but I had planned for this too. I had a bottle of Seagrams right down here. I just picked it up and went like that. It disappeared from my hand. You know, like, he's gone. So that's one of the funny things. We had a lot of funny things. It wasn't supposed to be funny, but it did turn out to be that way. I got to tell you about this rubber boat. I mentioned this rubber boat raid we were going to do. Big, slick operation we were supposed to be on, and attack this village several miles down the river, which was supposed to be a VC hotbed. So we were going to do a rubber boat assault. So they choppered in a company of Marines on the back side of that several miles away, and they were going to come this way and be a blocking force. And then we're going to get on these rubber boats very silently and sneak down the river, get out of the boats and attack this village and chase all the VC into this blocking force and annihilate the whole enemy and march on to Hanoi and raise a flag or something. But not quite the way it happened. We got the blocking force in position, and we reached a point where, again, we were following a trail but not on the trail.